Hi, welcome to the Neurocritical Care Podcast Hot Topic section. This is your host, Nicholas Morris from the University of Maryland Shock Trauma Center. And today I am really excited to talk about the Curing Coma Campaign and World Coma Day with Dr. DaiWai Olson. Dr. Olson is a distinguished teaching professor of neurology and neurosurgery at the UT Southwestern Medical Center. He began his nursing career in Iowa and obtained his PhD at the University of North Carolina. He worked as a staff nurse there and became an assistant professor at Duke University until he relocated his work to the UT Southwestern and is now the first nurse to be promoted to full professor there. Dr. Olson's work is focused on developing a more comprehensive understanding of how nursing care contributes to patient outcomes following acquired brain injury. He is a fellow of the Neurocritical Care Society, director of the Neuroscience Nursing Research Center, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Neuroscience Nursing, and co-chair of the International Curing Coma Campaign. Welcome, DaiWai Olson. We're thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I love listening to these podcasts. I'm thrilled that it's sort of my turn.
Well, thanks for taking the time out of your day. Maybe we can start by talking a little bit about the Curing Coma campaign that you co-chair, and you can let readers know who've been somehow hiding from this for the last few years. What is the Curing Coma campaign, and where are we now a few years into it?
Yeah, so we're kind of a little bit more than a few years. This is one of those things that started before COVID, so way back in the before times. And this started at a meeting we had in Miami where we were trying to figure, like, what's the next big thing? What's really big? What embodies neurocritical care? And we hit upon consciousness. And Jeff Ling used the phrase, "We're gonna wake the dead." And at that time, when we started saying, curing coma, a lot of people didn't even know what coma is. And I've been studying coma for 20 years, and I know less about what a coma is now.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we know now what coma is?
Yeah, no. People have heard me say this a lot. My mom, who has no medical training at all, she knows exactly what a coma is, right? The lay people know what a coma is to them, and that's what it means to them. So I think we would be wrong not to use this phrase. And then we got a little bit of pushback, like, we don't know what coma really is. Can you really cure something? And And then shortly after that, Javier Provencio, and he worked with a fantastic group of people. He had what I think is a key breakthrough article where we're starting to talk about coma and disorders of consciousness as different phenotypes and endotypes. Not only, what does it look like? There's some similarity that it's a person laying in a bed who's not responding, but what's the cause? What brought them to that state? And so about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, we started working on this, and Claude Hemphill is the co-chair, who is just a brilliant scientist. And we've been pushing forth and realizing that there are people all over the globe working on consciousness. This is like the hardest question we've ever faced, right? People come up to you, you're at Maryland Shock Trauma, and I bet you some family member has said, "Is my mom going to wake up? Dr. Morris, what's going to happen?"
And that discussion last week.
Yeah. This week it happened?
Yep.
And what'd you tell them?
Yep. We don't know, right?
Yeah,
time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah, well, we got to be able to do better.
Yeah.
Right. We need to figure out who and what. And Claude and I found that there's thousands of people working on different aspects of consciousness and consciousness emergence, and there are coma recovery centers in different areas around the world. And so the Curing Coma campaign is really pulling together scientists from different walks of life, different regions of the country, and different aims and foci to work together. That's the big thing. Is we think we're going to need probably about 400,000 people working on curing coma before we really we can really answer that question that you were asked last week.
And this is obviously a huge project, and as you mentioned, we're now years into this. What's the progress been like? How incrementally, where are we towards being able to answer that question?
Well, it's interesting that you should ask that. So I had my eval with my chair today, and I mentioned to him that everything through my career has been that I'm going to study this so I get closer to solving it. And then when you study it, you know more about it. So you're further away from solving it. So you're simultaneously making great progress and getting further away from your goal. I will say that one of the things I am super excited about is Claude and I are amazed at how fast this has grown. We knew it was important to us, but the speed at which it's growing, and I don't know, am I allowed to tell the listeners that you and I were talking beforehand, and
Sure,
you like you were reviewing a Coma article? Like these articles, they're coming out more, right? More people are taking on this grand challenge of consciousness. So we are making a lot more progress. But I think the biggest breakthroughs in the past 3 years or so are finding out exactly what we don't know. There's definitely some movement, and there's an exciting paper that Brian Edlow and his team published just last week. So there's movement forward, but I think it's mostly right now we're figuring out sort of the lay of the land. What is it we don't know?
Right. You mentioned to me before we got started that above all else, you're a neurocritical care nurse. And let's take it to the bedside. What does the Curing Coma campaign mean to the bedside neurocritical care nurse? And how important is it to them?
It's everything. It's everything to us, right? So as a nurse, we're at the bedside constantly. I think of a patient, and I've been given permission to use her name, Barbara. I took care of Barbara back when I was at Duke, and her husband was also at the bedside constantly, and I took care of Barbara for several weeks, and at that time I was younger, so I could work overtime, like 4 days in a row, 3 weeks in a row, and she was definitely comatose. And I am there every minute, like just boom, boom, boom. I run, I pee, I come back. And he's looking at me like, where's this going? And so the Curing Coma campaign, what we're discovering provides nurses with information they can share with family. Another story I'll tell you is I took care of a patient who had refractory status epilepticus. Maybe this, some people would call this coma, some not, and that's the endotype phenotype thing. But she passed, and we didn't know why she started having seizures. And then folks in New York and stuff, this term NORSE came out, new onset refractory status epilepticus, and I caught up with her mom. And as a nurse, I was able to tell her, we think your daughter died from NORSE. Now, NORSE isn't really a diagnosis, right? It's sort of a symptom cluster, but that meant so much to her, because then when people said, why did your daughter die? What happened? She had a thing.
Yeah.
And for us as nurses to give information to families, to give them a thing, is a big deal. Yep. We're not going to just say, oh, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We can say, this is what we know now.
Putting a name to it.
Yeah.
Super important. I was talking with I was on service last week, and I was talking to some of our nurses, and we had, as we always do, a couple of challenging cases, and this question of when someone's going to wake up came up, and it struck me one of the nurses was really struggling with this. It's sort of the same thing you were describing, had been with this patient for weeks and weeks, hadn't seen a lot of progress. And I could sense that she was beginning to feel defeated, feeling like, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard, running back and forth to take pee breaks? And she wasn't getting those signs, right, that show progress, that give us that sense of fulfillment in our job. And you can almost sense the burnout. Um, as in your experience, has coma contributed to bedside nursing burnout, and how does the Curing Coma campaign maybe provide some hope for this?
So in terms of nursing burnout, that's like a 7-hour podcast that we could talk about. But it doesn't only contribute to causing burnout. The campaign is going to contribute to reducing burnout, right? One of the things we're doing on the website, so if people want to go to curingcoma.org, that's our website. One of the things is we're collecting stories of hope, and every clinician has one. You have that patient that you thought, this person's not going to make it. They're not going to survive, but they did, right? I'll let you know that Barbara actually survived. And the neurosurgeons did approach her husband and say, we think maybe you should consider withdrawal of life support. And he said, no, 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 no. Vernon was his name. And he's like, no. And he had that hope. And that kept me going when she came back and visited with us. And when she came back, I'm like, we did a thing.
Mm-hmm.
We did a good thing. And that kept me going as a nurse. So I think one way that Curing Coma campaign is helping is as we collect some of these stories of hope, and we're not going to win every game. I get it. But it did really kind of a groovy thing that you can tell people, yeah, go to this website. Here's some story. These are, and you're realistic. It's not everybody. But I think we might reduce nursing burnout by empowering the nurses at the bedside more to share their knowledge and giving them knowledge to share.
Yeah, I agree. And for people who aren't aware, we feature some of those stories of hope on the podcast. So we've had some of the cases that were highlighted in Currents.
Yeah.
They've come on the podcast and really shared these inspirational stories, which I think keep all of us going. And I wish more people would listen to them, because it doesn't take many, I think, to recognize the power that really sustains a career. Okay.
Yeah. See, say that again. That sustains a career. Like how has it sustained your career?
Yeah. We're turning the tables. Well, I think
I'm sorry.
no, I love it. There was this kind of attention grabbing paper that came out recently in one of the JAMA family of journals, where they looked at burnout and self-fulfillment sort of as contradicting themes in different healthcare professions and in different fields. And both neurology and critical care sort of had high levels of burnout and fairly low levels of self-fulfillment, finding fulfillment in the career, which is kind of heartbreaking. Having one of those cases is a fulfillment booster. And it's not like a small level up. It's exponential. And when you get one of them to come back to your unit and walk through, and you see the smiles and the camaraderie that seemingly comes out of nowhere, I think that can sustain an entire ICU sometimes for months. We still talk about these cases. A year ago, so-and-so came back and they thanked us and they walked through, and we never thought that they would ever regain consciousness. And not only have they regained consciousness, but they're walking with a cane. Wow. Like these cases, right? They keep us all going, and they bring people to the field. And I think we don't do a good enough job of celebrating our successes. And I think it's one of the big problems that we have in neurocritical care, is we take the defeats really hard and personally, and we don't really celebrate our success as much as we should.
That's where so for anyone who's working in a clinic, when you get these patients who were in the ICU 3-4 months ago, 7 months ago, send them back to visit us. And there's a shared experience that you probably have. I know all of the nurses do, where a patient comes back, a recovered patient comes back, and it's not only from coma, it's from whatever prolonged illness, and they don't remember anybody, right? They're kind of looking awkwardly, going, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." But it's it's being reunited with the family.
Yeah.
And the nurses and nurses see this person as a human, and we all want to look at you and talk to you because you've recovered, and we know you really well. But to you, we're a bunch of strangers gawking. But it moves the unit forward. It gives me chills.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Let's talk a little bit about World Coma Day. So when is it? What can people look forward to? Give us the scoop.
So World Coma Day is every March 22nd. So this is sort of the first full day of spring. When the world wakes up, so do we. That's sort of the uniting thing. And this World Coma Day is March 22nd, 2024. We're going to have speakers, presentations, all from all walks of life, all over the globe. We'll have everything from 2-minute, shout outs. And if you haven't made your shout out, Maryland Shock Trauma should send a shout out. We're here in Coma. Those are always fun to watch. There's going to be some heavy science. There's going to be some light stuff. We're doing something very different this year. We will have a few live presentations, but we're embracing the millennial attitude. And you know how Netflix releases a whole series? So at midnight on the 22nd, we're going to release all of the videos.
So we can binge.
You can binge. You can select the ones you want to watch, so you're like, oh, Brian Edlow and Dave Menon, I'm gonna click on those, or you only got a few minutes and you go, I'm gonna just watch me some shout outs and stories of hope. We definitely we need to link the podcast through, and I know Sabina's working on that. So it's a different approach than we've done before. We've had a 24-hour long sort of telethon type of podcast. But if you go to again, go to curingcoma.org or worldcomaday.org, that you can see a link, you can sign up for it, you'll have access to the feed. All of these are going to be available on YouTube, so you can click on them anytime. And because healthcare never closes, I think this is going to be a little bit more unique. And also, it's helping us solve one of the problems, because coma is so ubiquitous globally. It's not an English-speaking phenomenon. There's going to be some content in multiple languages.
Excellent.
So it's really a neat difference on how we're gonna move it forward.
Any events or talks during World Coma Day that you're particularly looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to all of them. One of the things I get the most out of is hearing family members or patients who have recovered, right? I like we talked about just a little bit ago. This kind of keeps you going. But my favorite speaker from last year was a gentleman who gave a story, and he had lived in Glasgow, and he had this fascinating sort of how he came to be involved in coma science. And there's always a surprise storyteller who just has you kind of riveted. And so I'm looking forward to being surprised.
That sounds great. I think one idea I had for our ICU here is maybe to have sort of a listening party, like in the break room, where we just put on one of the patient stories and try to, through World Coma Day and the Curing Coma campaign, bring in that sense of sharing and stories of hope together. And I'm really looking forward to that.
That's a neat idea. So that's like you would all sit in the same room, you would listen to one story. I bet that would generate some great discussion.
Yeah, I can't wait. So really looking forward to World Coma Day. Well, DaiWai, thanks so much for joining us here on the podcast. Love to have you on for a longer pod to talk about, that 7 podcast series on burnout and other aspects of neurocritical care nursing. But this has been great, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to everybody on March 22nd.
All right. And do you want to give one more shout out to where people can tune into World Coma Day?
So we have lots of different ways to get there, but if you search World Coma Day, that'll show up in any search engine. We are at worldcomaday.org and curingcoma.org, or you can email me, daiwai.olson@utsouthwestern.edu, and I will point you in the right direction.
All right. Well, this has been the NCS podcast. We're available anywhere you get your podcasts, and CME are available for select episodes. Please continue to check us out. Thanks so much for joining in, and thanks again to DaiWai Olson.
Cheers.